I work on a project called Measures of Success, and the goal of this is to develop a reliable and robust set of indicators to measure the effectiveness of interfaith engagement. So in order to do this, we need to ask ourselves two questions. And the first one is, what do we mean by success? And once we've answered that, we then need to answer the second question, which is, well, how do we measure it? So on a very narrow definition of success, you could take very simple measures to assess impact. So for example, you could measure the number of participants that attend each session. You could measure the attrition rate, so that is the number of people that drop out during the course of the project, the diversity of the participants, and whether or not the project was completed within budget, for example. But what became very clear early on in the project is that for people involved in interfaith dialogue, there's a desire to implement really meaningful changes, both psychologically, so internal changes within the participants, but also socially. So they want to have some kind of meaningful impact in society. So therefore, simple indicators of success, such as just simply the number of people that attended, are no doubt useful, but what they don't provide is evidence of the kind of change that the stakeholders are reporting to seek. So what we need in that case is a multi-level and more complex conceptualization of success. And let's say it looks something like this. So during the interviews with key informants involved in UK interfaith, the conceptualization of success pertained very much to psychological change, and therefore led to the development of the first domain, what you might call the psychological domain of success. So psychological, or what's often called the micro level, in the sense that it refers to sort of individual level changes in the literature. Now, given that I've only got probably less than 5 minutes now, probably about 4 minutes, I'm only going to talk about this domain, the psychological domain of success, in this talk. So as I said, for the people that I spoke to involved in interfaith, success for them involved psychological change in the individuals taking part. So whether this was beginning to see members of other religions as natural allies rather than enemies, or perhaps this entailed a positive shift in attitude. So that would be breaking down the otherized thinking about members of another religious group. And finally, success also involved an increased degree of self-reflection on one's own religious commitment and traditions. So we reconfigured these three elements, sort of areas of success as elements within the domain. So it looks something like this. So the idea here is that these three elements make up the psychological domain of success, and that success is multi-directional, meaning that a positive change in any one of these elements should trigger positive change in another, if not all of these elements. So let's get to the nitty-gritty. Let's look at some possible indicators that might sit within these elements. And given the time constraints, I'm only going to look at the element of identity and attachment. So what might we be looking for? What might we be seeking to measure within this particular element? So these are some potential indicators that give us some idea of an individual's degree of attachment and identity towards a group or towards a religious unit. And the idea here is that indicators will be administered at the start of an interfaith project. So they'll be part of a battery of different measures that will take baseline measures. And then at the completion of the project, the participants will retake these measures, and we can gauge the degree of change that has happened in the participants. And this will then be followed up sort of perhaps 6 months or at a predetermined set of time after the completion of the project. We will then engage in sort of follow-up interviews with participants that will give us very useful qualitative data on the ways that participants have translated these changes into actual behaviour. So to do that, we need to understand something about the process of transfer, which is the process by which individual changes in participants lead to changes in the broader social community. So that would lead us on to the next domain of success, which we can see here as the community level. Sadly, I don't have time to talk about that, but what I do want to finish on is just talking a little bit about the end product. So the goal very much is to develop an evaluation framework which is highly flexible and will be used as a flexible resource for practitioners of interfaith dialogue that will enable them to generate as output the optimal evaluation strategy for their very specific interfaith project. And that's all from me. Thank you.